It's on now. And so I should make sure that I speak into this. And let me turn down the master volume a bit here. And I think it's working. And so far, so good. So much technology. So we have a debate on Friday between Nikita and Timan. And I have to microphone so I can here. And to South Koreans, China will be more effective than the U.S. in providing global leadership in addressing climate change. So, you know, one of the reasons why I'm in political science is because hello? One of the reasons why I'm in political science is because I think we are investigating truths about what it means to be a human being. I mean, when I make these outrageous statements that stereotyping, the predisposition for people to stereotype their world in terms of their perception of other relevant actors. I mean, I can stereotype this building, I can call it ugly. That doesn't mean very much. But when I say I stereotype the world, I stereotype other social actors that are more or less important for my ability to achieve what I want to achieve in this world. Security, dignity, self-respect. You are a relevant actor, and I have to deal with you. I have to interact with you. And we have a predisposition to use each other or attack each other. That's in our DNA. We are civilized. Civilization means using this massive forebrain that we've developed over, what, 4 or 5 million years? I think Homo sapiens and chimpanzees began to separate about 7 million years ago, right? But what became chimpanzees? Australopithecus australensis was I think was the first human hominid ancestor. That we have a predisposition to stereotype, but we can use this grossly overdeveloped forebrain here to veto the program. And we have to veto the program if we're going to save ourselves, human race, from destruction, because we have developed nuclear bombs. So for hundreds of thousands of years, it made DNA good sense to pass on my deoxynucleic acid, DNA. What is it? It made sense for me to pass on my DNA that when I saw you, another man, you're a threat. I kill you! And to hate you enough that I can pick up a gun, smash your skull, kill your children. And then I take the women and I make them my mates, and I spread my DNA in them. That made sense for 200,000 years. Or, because I'm an old man, I come over the water hole on the plains of what is today Africa, and I see demon. And I go, ah! And I run away. And I run fast because I'm afraid. Fight or flight. Fight or flight. And to stereotype in a way that gets the adrenaline pumping, gets the muscles strong, to fight or flight. And that might have been successful in helping produce us, Homo sapiens. But this got bigger and bigger and bigger as we learned about the ability as we develop the ability to deceive and trick each other. That's a theme that's come up over the years that I've seen in the media, that what makes Homo sapiens different is that we can imagine and portray different realities, different worlds. We can imagine that, and we've developed that by tricking each other. Oh no, the food isn't here. The food I'm hiding is over there. Trick you, deceive you, and seeing through those deceptions, that process of deceiving, seeing through, deceiving, produced this massive forebrain. And it also includes self-identifying with groups of people bigger than just my tribe or my family. D. Dominicus, I love D. Dominicus. You're threatening my sister. Fight or flight, fight or flight. But to imagine that I'm not only D. Dominicus, I'm Italian. You're threatening Italy. You're humiliating Italy. You're undermining Italy. Fight or flight. This is something that human beings have an ability to do, which I don't think other animals do. Other animals have culture, like we know whales, they have a culture and they pass on the way they sing their songs to their children in this area, which is different from the whales over here in another part of the ocean. Chimpanzees, we know they have culture. They teach their children. What is culture? What you pass on to your children. They teach their children how to make tools, to get ants, to break open nuts. This is all known in the last 40 years with Jane Goodall, the old British anthropologist who did the research in the 1970s to show chimpanzees, they make tools and they teach their children how to make tools. That's culture. And so we have Italian culture, we have Chinese culture, cultures that we imagine for communities that are imagined to be huge. Like, I'm Chinese and I'm proud of China, even though I will never meet 99.999% of those Chinese or 99.999% of those Italians. I'll never meet them, but I get upset when I think France is not respecting Italy. So nationalism and stereotyping and emotion or affect, they all go together. They all go together. And so this predisposition towards stereotyping includes exploiting tremendous perceived opportunities that you were degenerate. The way Hitler's Germany under Adolf Hitler in 1938, 1939 believed that they had the option, that Germany had the capability to conquer the entire world. How can you explain that? How can we explain that this country, Germany, acted as if it really had the capability, if it worked hard enough and tried successfully enough to conquer the world? How can we explain that? I mean, this is the potential power base. I don't have the countries indicated. Here is China, Soviet Union, Japan in 1938. Here's United States, United Kingdom, France, Italy, and Germany. This country in 1938 actually believed, collectively speaking, not everybody in Germany, but the dominant authorities, the people that ruled Germany, believed that they had the option of conquering the world. It's ridiculous. But they tried, which means they believed they could do it, and they failed. Lots of dead people, lots of destruction. How do you explain this? I think the answer has to be a psychological one. And so this actor could believe that it doesn't matter how big Soviet Union or China or United States or the British Empire are. It doesn't matter. They don't have the political will. They are not as good as us. They are not as organized as us. These people are ridiculous. They're pathetic, degenerate. They can't get organized. They don't know what they want. They're hopeless, just freaking hopeless in terms of their ability to do anything against us, because we are organized. We know what we want. And again, this was the view that dominated the United States after World War II, that if you appease this actor, you give it what it wants. When it says, we want the Sudetenland, we want the German areas of Czechoslovakia, we want Anschluss, unification with Austria, all Germans in one Germany. Yes, we want to have our own Air Force, our own Navy. We want to build our army and put it anywhere in Germany, everything that we were forbidden to do after World War I. And you give it what it wants. This actor that sees degeneracy, if you can appease it, you will confirm as a horrible mistake that you are indeed degenerate. And you'll make it even more aggressive. If you try desperately for peace, let's just give Hitler what he wants because he's upset, because he's humiliated. We'll appease him. No, never appease a power that's belligerent because it sees opportunity. Never appease a power that's belligerent because it sees degeneracy around it. And so that was the dominant view after World War II, that the Soviet Union was a Russian version of Nazi Germany. And that's why you're in this classroom right now. Anes, Timen, me, right now you're in this class because of this view that the Soviet Union was a Russian version of Nazi Germany, and you cannot appease communism wherever it expands. You must contain it, including in South Korea and in Vietnam and in Latin America. And so, I think I've gone over this before in the past, but the reason I'm talking about it again now is because you see the same kinds of discussions going on right now in terms of why is let's see, I have it here somewhere. This was in today's news report. So here you see this individual here. He's the director of MI6, the British version of the CIA. And he's saying that, what does he say? The risk of Chinese miscalculation through overconfidence is real. In other words, China, he's claiming, he could be wrong, that China's prevailing view is shifting towards perceiving opportunity. In other words, that America and the West are hopelessly unorganized, that China is moving in this direction of seeing opportunity against the United States and its allies. Just like Germany grossly miscalculated in trying to conquer the world, he's saying China is belligerent, increasingly belligerent, because it sees opportunity. He's not saying those words, but you can see it emerging here. Why is China making pressure over Taiwan? Why is China making pressure over the South China Sea? What does he say? He says, what does he say? Chief of British Secret Intelligence Service MI6 is concerned that China could make a miscalculation due to overconfidence in its own global status. The tectonic plates are shifting as China's power and its willingness to assert it grows. Beijing believes its own propaganda about Western frailties and underestimates Washington's resolve, added Moore, who joined the spy agency 34 years ago. The risk of Chinese miscalculation through overconfidence is real. Now, I mean, he's not portraying China's rapidly and militantly belligerent as Hitler's Germany, but it's moving in that direction, he's claiming. And this is the foundation of the American, British, Australian AUKUS security alliance that was announced, that the British and the Australians and the Americans, together with South Korea and Japan, will contain a belligerent, aggressive China that's supposedly aggressive. You must not appease, you must contain a belligerent, aggressive power. He's saying Chinese intelligence officers seek to exploit the open nature of our society, including through the use of social media platforms. This is viewing China in diabolical enemy terms, moving in that direction, the way the Americans viewed the Soviet Union and its spies and agents seeking to subvert American democracy because of America's open political system. It's like, wow. Diabolical enemy, diabolical enemy. The Chinese Communist Party leadership increasingly favor bold and decisive action justified on national security grounds, Moore said. The days of former Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping, hide your strength, bide your time, are long over. And so I won't go through it all here, but just to show you how this framework is not just a history lesson, it's a predisposition, particularly we see in nation states like England, like United States, like China, like Russia, to engage in this stereotyping more so than non-nation states. And, by the way, I just wanted to show you where these, I think I showed you these stereotypes I described them in previous classes, right? So let's see. Remember the degenerate stereotype versus the diabolical enemy stereotype. And stereotypes are wrong. Stereotypes lead to miscalculations. They lead to lost wars, like the Americans lost in Vietnam. And so we talked about degenerate versus diabolical enemy stereotype. This is from my professor, whom I studied with in the University of Pittsburgh years ago. He died in 1997. He developed this theory of foreign policy motivation and stereotype image in international relations. And he told us in class, he got the image, the degenerate image from reading this book, which this is the purest description. It doesn't open up. Okay, let me see if I can open it up the old-fashioned way. It's like things change on the internet, so. I wonder if it will show up because they're getting pressure not to have this book available because it's a hateful book, right? Hitler's book, Mein Kampf. That's where my professor said he got this diabolical, this degenerate image. Hitler told you what he was going to do. He told everybody what he was going to do if he were to become leader of Germany. He described in his book. In the image that he had, that he portrayed in the world, it's all here. The degenerate image is all here. This is, Nazi Germany is the last time, I think, again, I'm minority view, but I think not Hitler's Germany was the last time we saw an intensely aggressive, opportunistic, expansionist great power. Not the Soviet Union, Hitler's Germany. That's the model for a country, a great power that's belligerent because it sees a marvelous opportunity to impose its will against a degenerate, ridiculous set of adversaries. And where did he get the diabolical enemy image? Remember the diabolical evil empire image that Ronald Reagan talked about? He got it from here. Another book by another famous person who's still alive, by the way. He's quite old. He went to school with Cotta, my professor. They were to school together in Harvard University, along with, see if I can find the original book. Yeah, this one, although this is a revised version. The first version came out in the 1950s, right? And let's see if I can find it here. So there you can see him, Henry Kissinger, born in 1923. My professor said this is where he got his diabolical enemy image. What does, and that's not the original. The original book came out, I think, in 1952 or 1953 or 1955, but I don't see it there. See what happens if I click here. Yeah, well, it takes too long to search for. But the picture he paints of the Soviet Union in that book is this. The Soviet Union is amazingly rational and cynical in calculating in its worldwide plan for world domination, working through its agents and spies, Kim Il-sung, Ho Chi Minh, Mao Zedong, Fidel Castro. They're all working for the Soviet Union in this worldwide conspiratorial movement to, of course, spread their domination. That there's no politics in Moscow in making foreign policy. There's the rule and the will of the leader. There's no politics among different groups competing with each other with different worldviews and different motivations. No, Stalin, again, the stereotype is like in fantasy fiction. Am I an old man? Did you all read Lord of the Rings or watch the Lord of the Rings films, right? Soviet Union is Mordor. And there's no politics in Mordor. There's the will of Sauron, the Dark Lord. There's no politics in Mordor. In Baradur, in the Kremlin. Politics is complexity, right? Of course, the Soviet Union confronts us, we Westerners, we silly Westerners, who love human beings, who respect the dignity of the individual, who respect everyone's right to express their point of view and to debate and dialogue in politics and have elections with multiple points of view and blah, blah. And the Soviet Union doesn't have to deal with that. There's just the will of Stalin. And we do our best. But of course, there are those fools and idiots within our countries who don't understand the true nature of the evil empire. And at best, they're dupes or fools, like those college students protesting against the Vietnam War that you read about in the textbook in the 1960s and 70s, who are too lazy or too spoiled through the prosperity of their societies to do what they need to do the way their fathers and grandfathers fought in World War I and World War II in the Korean War. They're at worst fools, dupes, or at worst traitors, consciously working for Stalin, but lying, of course. Oh, I'm not working for Stalin. I'm not working for communists. No. This person, on an individual level, the analog is paranoid individual, right? That I don't see complexity. Like, again, why are you here in this room? Because of this, right? So imagine me being the United States, and I'm a big, powerful country. We won World War II, hardly damaged at all from World War II. Do not have much experience in international relations, unlike you decadent Europeans with your, centuries of diplomacy and war. And then we win World War II in the Soviet Union. Timon's the Soviet Union, right? So before World War II, I'm the United States. So America becomes some understanding of so many. When you're a different but I don't know your rich personal history. I don't know your centuries of development. I, United States, I hope some building a big economy and moving on to that. Here I am. This time, the United States economy is one half. The whole world's production is just the United States economy in 1945. 50%, with 4% of the world's population, with Asia and Europe destroyed. And so this is the world. Imagine those doors are locked. I can't leave. You can't leave. I can't leave. And I've got nuclear weapons. Then Tina, please. Why would he destroy me? I loaned products to him under the Lend-Lease program in World War II. What problem does he have with me? And you might say, well, I remember you, Harry Truman, when you were a senator from Missouri, saying that when Germany invaded Soviet Union, you know, why don't we just let the Germans and Russians kill each other? Ha 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 ha! I know that the Soviet Union was not recognized by the United States until 1933, which coincidentally was when Hitler became prime minister in Germany. I know you remember how we had soldiers, the Americans had soldiers in Vladivostok, not far from here, occupying Russian territory to try to, as Churchill said, strangle the Bolshevik baby in its crib. And so he wants, for some unknown reason, he wants to kill me. So how is, you can sit down, I don't want to keep bothering you. So how is my perception of T-Men going to affect how I perceive Alyssa, how I perceive Anais, how do I perceive UJ? Eugene? Huh? Huh? I can't hear, sorry, I'm an old man. Puhi, and your name? Eugene. Eugene. How is it going to affect how is my relationship, my perceived threat going to affect you, and you in terms of how I understand you, and you? Yeah, I'm going to see you in terms of my relationship with him. Are you a friend with him or an enemy of him? Because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And you're a big enemy. And you're going to kill me if I'm not careful. And so I'm going to evaluate you in terms of your relationship with him and me. I'm going to evaluate you in terms of your relationship with him and me. And that's it. I'm not going to bother to look deep into your histories, into your centuries of conflict. I don't know what kind of relationship you have with her, about what issues and disputes you have with her. You're part of the Pakistan, and you're India, and she's Great Britain, and you don't like each other, and Europe, and you have issues with Britain. I don't care about that. What are you going to do about T-Men? Your conflicts, they're minor stuff. This guy wants to conquer the world, and he can do it. And you want to fight about your old conflicts with the Belgium or England because they abuse you. Who cares? Help me against T-Men. Oh, you don't want to help me? You don't want to help me? You're hesitating. The T-Men get to you. T-Men got to you. T-Men promised you something. So I don't see Vietnamese nationalism. I don't see Korean nationalism. I see the world in good versus evil, Manichaean worldview, that there's the free world versus the communist world. You can't be in the middle. How can you be in the middle when you're dealing with Satan and the devil and hell and Mordor? You can't be neutral. You can't be non-aligned. How can you be non-aligned when the forces of evil want to conquer the world? you can let me turn my back on you, or my friends turn their back on you, and stab you in the back. By taking orders from Cuban. The paranoid. Yes. Well, I know. I mean, okay, but like, for example, you're right. When it comes to, see, because his ideas, his rhetoric, his words, his explanation of what he wants in terms of nationalistic universalism sounds really appealing to you British, you Indians, or you Pakistanis, or you Cubans, or you Filipinos dealing with European and American imperialism. He's talking about take all the money from the landed aristocrats that cooperated with the French and the British and the Portuguese and the Spanish and made all their money and take their land and take their money under socialism and give it to the poor people, give it to the peasants, give the peasants land. And you can do what he did. But when World War I was over, and when the Russian Civil War started, and millions more died in the Russian Civil War. And then by the end of the Russian Civil War, your economy was 12% of what it was in 1914 before the start of World War I. 12%. And then what does he do? By 1945, he industrializes the country, gets invaded by Germany. Germany kills 27 million of them. He still defeats Germany. Occupies Berlin, occupies half of Europe, encourages Mao Zedong and the communists to come to power in China, and then rebuilds his country. By 1950, his economy is recovered from the war. And then he's the first to put a satellite into space, Sputnik, like Sputnik 5 vaccine, Sputnik V, Sputnik into orbit in 1957. He's the first country to put a man in orbit in 1960. So his words, his nationalistic universalism is going to be very appealing to you countries dealing with the ugly sides of French or Belgian or British or Spanish or Portuguese capitalism. When your experience with capitalism was not very nice, including Koreans with the Chinilpa cooperating with the Japanese, that was capitalism in Korea. So yeah, he's even more dangerous than Hitler's Germany because he's got a nicer ideology. I mean, Hitler's talking about white people, white power, Aryan race. Oh, okay, that's appealing to white people, but he's talking about socialism, which you might like, given your experiences under capitalism. And you're going to listen because I'm a racist, and I think anybody who's not white is kind of like a child. He's child. And so you know what you are? Post-colonial state, you're a developing country. You're a developing people. You're like children. And you might listen to his lies, his siren song. And so what do we have to do? Because he's evil. He's got his spies and enemies. He's promised them things. So because you're such a bastard, sorry, Timon, we have to do bad things too. So Park Chung-hee isn't the nicest guy, but he's better than Kim Il-sung, right? Is Park Chung-hee, Kim Il-sung? Park Chung-hee, Kim Il-sung, which one do you choose? You have to choose. In this world, you have to choose. It's either on our side with Park Chung-hee or you're working for North Korea. Ho Chi Minh or well, there are a lot of self-views, right? You have to choose. And I know Park Chung-hee wasn't a nice guy, but it's his fault because he's spreading insurrection and conspiratorial subversion. Bad, Soviet Union, bad, bad. And so we will support Park Chung-hee in Korea. We will support the Shah of Iran in 1953 that will put in power. He might not be the nicest guy. And then, because we're America, we've got lots of this. Woo! Woo! Here, Park Chung-hee. Here, Shah of Iran. Here, Ferdinand Marcos. Here you go. And then your economies will develop and grow and establish a strong middle class that's vested their interests in capitalism, in private property. And then you can democratize because you'll be stable, because you have a middle class, a business class. And voila, you'll be a stable democratic country. Inoculated, vaccinated against the sickness, the virus of communism. Or the virus now today of Islamism. Well, it didn't work in Afghanistan. I mean, where else is it not going to work? So you're reading about transnational problems, and I think there's a lot of transnational problems highlighted in the book. And one of them is terrorism. So what is terrorism? Terrorism is frustrated nationalism. Frustrated nationalism. Terrorism is what you use to try to undermine the countries and regimes that became friends of the United States during the Cold War, like the House of Saud, to attack Israel, to undermine these different groups that America supported and different actors that America supported because they might not be very nice, but they're better than the communists. And that meant, you know, some nationalisms succeed, some fail. I mean, Vietnamese nationalism won. Korean nationalism hasn't won yet in terms of unifying Korea under one state. And so to continue on here, let me see here. I have a lot of different things that I prepared to talk about. And so you have, let me see, what do I want to highlight here in talking about terrorism? These are my introductory notes that I cover when I teach my class in the Middle East. And what I want to cover first, pan movements. Pan-German nationalism was successful under Otto von Bismarck and the Germans. The German states were unified, most of them, right? Liechtenstein, no. Luxembourg, no. But Austria, for a time, came under Hitler's control and then was separated again after the war. But for the most part, most Germans, and you know, and some Germans in Switzerland, still outside of Germany, but for the most part, pan-German nationalism overcame the resistance of Denmark and Austria and France through greater power capability, through victory on the battlefield to unify Germany in one German state. Same is true with pan-Italianism. Our Italians are still upset about losing Corsica to France and Dalmatia to Croatia, but most Italians are unified in Germany due to pan-Italian nationalism in the 19th century. And there are failed pan movements as well. There was a strong movement among intellectuals in Eastern Europe to unify all Slavs, Bulgarians, Serbs, Russians, Ukrainians in one big pan-Slavic Orthodox state. What to do with Poland? Hard to say because they're Catholics, right? But and this helped start World War I, pan-Slavism, because the Tsar, the ruling emperor in Russia, he claimed, I rule Russia because I don't have really democracy in Russia because I'm the defender of the Slavs. Yeah, that's why I'm in power. And then when he had to put up or shut up, when Austria declared war on Serbia, after the Serbian secret police helped kill the crown prince of Austria in Sarajevo in 1914, right? He had to go to war because of public opinion pressure, right? And then, of course, pan-Slavism failed. Pan-Turkism, unifying all Turks from Istanbul up to here. That was a significant movement in the early 20th century, and it failed also. What about pan-Arab nationalism? Unifying these states that France and Britain and Italy and other countries created, Libya, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Oman, Yemen, countries that were created by borders drawn by London, Paris. Can they overcome this unification and unify the way Vietnam unified, the way the Germans unified, the way the Italians unified? When I studied with my professor, he put it 50%, 50-50. Then later, he told me before he died, I think he made an interesting comment. He said, Egypt is not first and foremost an Arab state. Egypt is an Egyptian nation state. Those people speak Arabic, but that doesn't make them first and foremost, typically speaking, I'm not saying everybody, doesn't make them Arab. The way I speak English doesn't make me English, right? That Egypt is an Egyptian nation state. And if that's true, that really Egypt is an Egyptian nation state with strong Islamic and strong Arab subcomponents in their identity profile, still, you might have to push this a little bit more this direction. The problem with Egyptian nationalism is that Egypt has almost nothing in the way of natural resources. We don't really know, 100 million people live in Egypt. They all live within close to the River Nile, 5% of the territory. They've got some tourism. Go see the great pyramids. Go see the Sphinx. Ooh. And they've got some oil and gas now, but that's it. So that's always been the weakness for Egyptian nationalism, that they don't have access to the oil that the British separated with the borders between Iraq and Jordan and Syria with France. So, but there's still the dream. If you're an Arab, you know that there was an Arab golden age when the Arab Empire was vast. Words that we still use today reflect this glory of the Arab Empire. How do you say alcohol in French? Alcohol, drink, the alcohol beverage. Alcohol, it's an Arabic word. Algebra, you call it algebra in French? Algebra, kind of mathematics. What do you call algebra? Yeah, that's an Arabic word. Chemistry comes from alchemy. That's an Arabic prefix. These are all Arabic words. The beautiful stars. The Koreans have a different tradition of astronomy, but you look up at the stars at night in the countryside in Switzerland or Belgium, you see beautiful stars. They've all got Arabic names. Betelgeuse, Rigel, these are all Arabic names that the Europeans got when they began to recover after the collapse of the Roman Empire. So what point am I trying to make? The Arabs have a memory of a golden age. They know that at one time they were unified, rightly or wrongly, whether it's a true belief or not, but they believe that they were unified at one time and they were rulers of the world. They were the dominant civilization, at least in this part of Africa, Asia, Europe. And they've got the Holy Quran. It's written in Arabic. God speaks Arabic. So, yeah, how strong is Arab nationalism? And again, in terms of this class regarding the failure of pan movements, like this pan movement failed, pan-Iranian movement, there was a pan-Iranian movement among the Iranian Aryan peoples of Iran and the Caucasus. What caused them to fail? The belief that it's not achievable, right? If you want something that you can't get, if you want something that you cannot achieve, it hurts. It hurts. It hurts your heart. It hurts your heart. And if you try and fail and spend lots of resources trying and failing to unify your country and you keep failing, it becomes, you kind of believe it's hopeless. You know what you do? You make yourself not want it anymore because it hurts to want something that you can never get. So what was Aesop's fable of the fox and the grapes? The fox can't get the grapes. I want the grapes. I want the grapes. I want to eat it. I can't get, those grapes are sour grapes. I don't want those grapes anyway. I don't want to unify all Arabs. I'm a proud Saudi, a proud Kuwaiti, a proud Jordanian, a proud Syrian, a proud Iraqi, a proud Libyan, a proud Algerian, a proud Egyptian. And that's fundamentally what Israel's strategy for success relies upon, making the Arabs believe it's hopeless. You're never going to unify because Israel cannot allow the Arabs to unify. It won't survive if the Arabs unify. And so, the mother of all battles, the US impending invasion of Iraq after Iraq invaded Kuwait to make Saddam Hussein the Otto von Bismarck of the Arabs. The mother of all battles, and the Americans blow him away in 3 days. We still joke about it. Oh, it's the mother of all battles, huh? That's the mother of all college courses, the mother of all lectures, the mother of that's Saddam Hussein. What a funny, silly guy. So, yeah, I said here, the Pan-Slav movement caused World War I. Pan-Turanism is probably over, although there's still a legacy. I mean, you find Turkish business people from Turkey all over Central Asia, in Kazakhstan, in Turkmenistan. So there's still that sympathy that, we're all Turks. We know our culture. We know how to talk to each other. Or among the Slavs, right? Russians are all over Bulgaria and Serbia, even though Russia's a weak country. Russian business people are everywhere in that area. But that's it. It's a relatively minor self-identity. Pan-Islamism, unify all Muslims in one big pan-Muslim state, probably not going to make it. Challenges to see, for example, the impact of Pan-Islamism in Malaysia and Indonesia. Pan-Arabism is right on the line, but this defeat of the Americans in Afghanistan, that's significant because if you're a pan-Islamist like Osama bin Laden, you're going to say, we defeated the United States. It can be done. It can be done. We just did it. So it's not hopeless. We can do it. And it's not just me that made that observation. People criticizing Biden have warned the same. This is going to encourage the jihadists. They're going to believe that they can win, so they're going to fight and die and try. So where are the Arab nationalists? Where are they most concentrated? Well, it used to be in greater Syria. Right? That included Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, Israel, Palestine, that the French and the British divided up in the Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1917. The Sykes-Picot Agreement. Yeah, when I was your age, studying in college, we didn't have Wikipedia. And so my professor would talk about Sykes-Picot Agreement. Where do you find out about the Sykes-Picot Agreement? You know what you have to do when I was your age? When you wanted to find out about the Sykes-Picot Agreement, you'd have to go to the library, So the this was a secret agreement between the British and the French about how they're going to divide up the Arab world from the Ottoman Empire once the war was, oh, I got to select English, sorry. Once the war was over, between Monsieur Sykes and the Monsieur Picot and Mr. Sykes of Britain. And this basically created the states of Iraq and Syria and Jordan in 1917. And we know about this because this is a secret agreement, but we know about it because the British and the French gave a copy of the agreement to the Russians. There's a secret agreement about what are we fighting for in World War I, and what are we going to do with the Ottoman Empire, which is on the side of the Germans. And the British viewed World War I as a life and death struggle for the British Empire. And so they wanted to save the British Empire, which means they wanted to make sure that there was an agreement on what the world would look like after World War I was over. So when the war is going on, they negotiate with the French. If we win this war, what do you want, France? And France said, France was the first to break up Greater Syria. We want a homeland for the Catholics of Lebanon, the Maronites. So I don't know, but the French and the Maronite Catholics of Lebanon, they have a close relationship, right? So they wanted a homeland for Lebanon. And then also the British and the French make this area the area of French influence, this area the area of British influence. This was supposed to become an area, but of course the Kurds well, we'll have to talk about that later. But and then the British wanted the Jews of Europe on their side against Germany during World War I. And the Jews of Europe feel most comfortable in all of the areas of Europe and Germany. So they negotiate with Chaim Weizmann. Chaim Weizmann is a leader of the British Jewish community in Great Britain. And Chaim Weizmann agrees to motivate and mobilize the Jews to side with Britain against Germany in the war, in return for Britain agreeing that the Jews will have a homeland in ancient Israel, Palestine. And the British say, yeah, sure. And that led to the Balfour Declaration by the Secretary of Foreign Affairs in Britain, that Britain in 1917 is committed to a homeland for the Jews in the area of Palestine. And then, remember, this is like me against Tiemann during the Cold War. This is the Britain against Germany, right? Germany's going to destroy the British Empire. Whatever you want, we'll give it to you. Just kill Germans. Just kill Germans. So there's Arab nationalism emerging, and the Arab ruling family in Medina and Mecca is the family that rules Jordan today. The Hashemite family. And let me see if I can, I've never looked this up. Oh yeah, here's this correspondence between the ruler, the British commissioner in Egypt, because Britain's ruling Egypt at this time, and he makes a promise to the Hussein of the Hijaz. Hijaz is where Mecca and Medina are located in Saudi Arabia, the two holy places in Islam. He says, yes. If you rise up against the Turks who are on the side of the Germans, we will support an independent state for the Arabs of the Ottoman Empire, in the McMahon-Hussein correspondence. And as I said, we know all about this because the Bolsheviks, when they took power in St. Petersburg, they published all these treaties. They published the Sykes-Picot Agreement. See, this is why you workers and peasants of the world are dying, so that the Russians and the British and the French can divide up the Ottoman Empire. Moscow was supposed to get Constantinople, the capital of the Orthodox religion, Orthodox Christian religion. And so the war is over. The British send Lawrence of Arabia to help organize and fight with the Arabs against the Turks. And the war is over. And they made all of these contradictory claims to the French, to the Jews, to the Arabs. So how are the British going to reconcile these claims? They're going to give who is politically most influential what they want, and those who are not politically influential in London are going to get screwed, and those are the Arabs. So they didn't give the Arabs what they wanted. They instead made the children of Hussein, you can see the Balfour Declaration here, the king of Iraq and the king of Jordan, and then of course the king of Iraq was killed, but the king of Jordan is a descendant of Hussein. He's a great grandson of Hussein. So the point I'm trying to make is outrage if you're an Arab nationalist. You see all of this oil wealth being used to fuel the corrupt, decadent lifestyle of the House of Saud when you have starvation in Sudan and Yemen, with this cooperating behind the scenes with the US. And these traditional ruling elites, the House of Saud, they don't have a problem with Israel because they're not Arab nationalists. They're traditional feudal aristocrats. And that is the source of terrorism, frustrated Arab nationalism. Okay, so my question to you is, how powerful is Korean nationalism? Now the Cold War is over. It's been over for 30 years. Here's a news report that came out in the New York Times yesterday. The division between North and South Korea is one of these legacy issues from the Cold War. Is Korean nationalism going to unify the Korean nation into one state? It hasn't happened yet. 30 years since the Soviet Union disappeared. So this is the news report. We have defectors going from North Korea to South Korea. And some of these defectors leaving North Korea to go to South Korea are being arrested because the South Korean government is suspicious that they're really spies from North Korea. They're trying to convince defectors who left North Korea to go to South Korea, who are now in South Korea, to come back to North Korea as propaganda victories for North Korea, that South Korea is not a great place. Look at this person went to South Korea, and then they come back to North Korea and say how South Korea is bad. So this is the latest story. This woman is arrested because the South Korean intelligence agencies, created during the Cold War, view her as basically an agent of North Korea. She denies it, of course. In May, they arrested Song. She's 44 on charges of being at the Ministry of State Security lure or blackmail, helping the Ministry of State Security of North Korea lure or blackmail North Korean defectors living in South Korea into returning to the North. Her case has since provided rare glimpses into the clandestine battle the rival Koreas have waged over Korean defectors living in the South. Under its leader, Kim Jong-un, North Korea has plotted to lure North Korean defectors in the South back to their former homeland, using whatever means it could, including recruiting people like Song. But the South's counter-espionage authorities are equally determined to thwart the North's operation, carefully screening newly arriving defectors from the North, like Song, to catch anyone linked to its efforts. She's been sentenced to 3 years in prison because they think she's really a spy of North Korea. She said, when I came to South Korea, I confessed to what I did in the North to make a fresh start in the South, Song said in an August letter she sent from jail to her sister, also a North Korean defector in the South. I was forced to do what I did, but they say that that doesn't erase the crime. It goes on here. More than 33,800 North Koreans have defected to South Korea since the 1990s. But since Kim took power a decade ago, at least 28 of them have mysteriously resurfaced in North Korea. How and why they went back to the totalitarian state they had risked their lives to flee has been one of the great mysteries in inter-Korean relations. South Korean officials fear that some of the hundreds of defectors who have disappeared in recent years may have also ended up in the north. North Korea has used the returnees for propaganda, arranging news conferences where they describe how lucky they were to escape the living hell they found in the south, to return to the bosom of the fatherland. Song's arrest showed that South Korea's counterintelligence officials were not sitting idle. Between 2009 and 2019, they arrested at least 14 North Koreans who entered South Korea as defectors, accusing them of arriving here on spy missions that include plots to bring fellow defectors back to the north, according to government data submitted to the National Assembly. And so she describes how she ended up, how she was trapped, how she agreed to work with the North Korean, but then she admitted when she got to the South that she had been working for the North Korean intelligence, but she was forced to, or else she was going to be killed. Confronting her about her illegal work as a cash broker, shifting money between Koreans in China and Korea, because people in North Korea are starving, so they need money. But it's illegal to bring money from outside of North Korea to China. The ministry gave her a stark choice: serve time in a prison camp or cooperate with its agents to lure North Korean refugees in South Korea back to the north. For Song, who had already been in a labor camp from 2007 to 2009 for the crime of illegally entering China for food in the wake of a famine in the north, the choice was obvious. So her sister, who's also in South Korea, said she had to cooperate to live, and her appeal was dismissed by the South Korean court, saying that she helped the North Korean secret police for personal gain as well. And goes on with more detail about what she did and who she worked with in terms of North Korean agents. With the defectors' help, Yon located 3 North Korean defectors in the south. Prosecutors said he tried to persuade them to return to the north by putting their North Korean relatives on the phone with them. One of the defectors, Kang Chal-woo, and his girlfriend, also North Korean defector in the south, returned to the north through China in 2016 and later appeared on North Korean TV. And so it goes on to describe this complex situation of what was going on. Partly as a result of these crackdowns, the number of North Korean refugees arriving in the south dropped to 1,000 in 2019 from 3,000 in 2009. And then the pandemic caused it to drop even more. North Korea has called the defectors traitors and human scum because everybody throws around the label traitor. You work for South Korea, you're a traitor. You work for the Japanese and now American puppet state. No, you, North Korea, everybody throws around the term traitor in the Middle East as well. Traitor, 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 traitor. And what do you do with traitors? You kill them. But it's online propaganda channels have also interviewed family members who cheerfully appealed to defectors, telling them that Kim promised to forgive their crimes if they returned home. And so, but South Korean counterintelligence officials have also have a history of fabricating evidence in their overzealous hunt for North Korean spies. In 2016, South Korea announced the arrival of 12 young North Korean waitresses and their male manager, billing their defections as a major coup against Pyongyang. The manager later said that the South's National Intelligence Service plotted with him to bring the women here against their will. So anyway, just to highlight. So my question to you is, the U.S. government should regularly comment publicly on human rights conditions and situations in the Korean Peninsula. Do you think the United States should be commenting regularly about these issues in the state of human rights conditions in North Korea, South Korea? Should the United States be involved? The Koreans, since you live here, how do you think the United States has a legitimate place, role to play in confronting, talking about human rights in South Korea human rights in North Korea. So let me divide you into groups. And some people are not here in the classroom, but they're online. So we use Google Zoom. And we'll use Google Zoom. Use breakout rooms. And I think, which one is breakout rooms? Ki, Ko, Il, Si, Chong, Ju. Is that breakout room? Oh, this is Sway, Wei, Shi, Shi. Yeah, I asked you this before. Okay. So we maybe divide up into group of three in three groups and assign you automatically. So please join your groups. So Do-hee, Nick, and Cho Hyung Kyung, and Anais, Jaewon, and Kang Tong-un, Elisa Timen, and Kim Eugene. Please join your groups. And do you think the United States has a legitimate right to comment on human rights conditions on the Korean Peninsula, given the role of the United States in Korea? Is the United States business? It's an ethical question. And so please join your groups. And who's going to speak? Heads is the top person in each group. And it's tails. Heads is the bottom person in each group. And it's tails, so the middle person. So Nick, Jaewon, and Timan will speak for their groups. So please communicate with each other. If people are not here, they're only online, please talk to them online. Communicate with them if they're not here. And come up with a decision as to an agreement as to where your group is on whether or not you think the United States has a legitimate role to play in claiming to critique the human rights performance of North Korea, South Korea. Does the United States have a right to comment, to critique? And so please decide where your group fits. And I will write a statement as well. And, I will be, heads will be 1, 2, and 3. And it is heads. Heads, I am 1. Strongly agree. It's tails. So I'm agree or neutral, cannot decide. Heads, I'm agree. And it's tails. So I'm neutral, cannot decide. So I will write a neutral, cannot decide statement. Okay, I'm going to close the rooms. We have less than a minute. Testing. Yeah, so you have to wait for this to quit before it'll. I don't know if I think it's recording, even though it's still shutting the breakout rooms. So who's going to speak first? So what did I write? I wrote the following. I was assigned neutral. The U.S. government can comment on anything it wants to, but in order to avoid infuriating nationalists by appearing to favor America's friends and allies, if the U.S. should also critique the abuses of its friends, including Israel and Turkey and Saudi Arabia. The U.S. never penalizes Israel seriously for its oppression of the Palestinians, and the whole world knows it. The effect then is to undermine human rights protection rather than support it. So I'm sorry, the board is not easy to clean. I don't know, it's hard to read. So I'm stating in this assigned role that the U.S. criticism of North Korea or China for their human rights abuses simply infuriates Chinese nationalists who say, well, look what the Americans do in Latin America, or how they support Israel, or look at how the Americans treat their black people, with 30% of black people of the prisoners in the United States being African American, how America has over 2 million people in prison, double the number of people that China has in prison. And China is 4 times the size of the United States. In other words, this looks like it's propaganda, that America really isn't concerned about the human rights of Uyghurs in China. It's a way by which to try to undermine support for China around the world and to weaken the control of the Communist Party at home, because America is not really concerned about human rights. If America was concerned about human rights, it would start by removing the sanctions from Cuba that caused such tremendous consequences, economic suffering in Cuba, because Fidel Castro dared challenge America's corporate and control over the Cuban economy. Look what America did throughout Latin America. America doesn't really care about human rights. They say they do, but it's a lie. To humiliate China and to encourage the Uyghurs to resist Beijing's control. So you know what we have to do? We have to put more control over the Uyghurs, because the Uyghurs are being encouraged by the United States to resist against Beijing's control. That's the danger when you criticize countries' human rights record. You're calling them barbaric. You're calling them barbaric, that they're culturally primitive brutes. We Americans know, because we're democratic. We're only 250 years old. But if you're China, you're thousands of years old. You're going to call us barbaric, the Chinese people? You're going to say, you Iranians, you're not allowed to have nuclear weapons. Israel can have nuclear weapons. That's okay, but not you Iranians. Because, you know why? Because you're barbarians. You're cruel supporters of terrorism. So what does that make you feel? Makes you feel upset if you're a nationalist, right? So let me, again, flip the coin. Heads, one speaks first. And it is tails. Heads, it's group two. And it is heads. So group two is assigned group two. I gotta. So that's Jaewon Kim. Jaewon, what did your group decide? Where does your group fit on this scale? Jaewon?
Oh, we also had, we both had pro and con for the topic.
Ah, yeah. Why?
When, and for pro, she said that the US government should comment publicly, but somehow she felt that like the human rights situation of South Korea is not known. Human rights situation for Korean Peninsula is not known worldwide, so this would bring the topic to daylight. And for con, and I was on the con because I thought that there is no such human rights restraints in the Korean Peninsula, because for the article of the North Korean girl imprisoned in South Korea, I think that's kind of regulation on the truce agreement.
Okay.
So I thought as a con.
Okay. So they're neutral, cannot decide because they disagree. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I mean, you read some comments by not US government leaders, but by human rights observers that claim that the conditions in prison camps in North Korea are as cruel as what we had seen maybe during Nazi Germany during World War II. I mean, it's pretty bad in North Korea. The question is why, right? Are these people considered to be traitors working for the United States as spies of South Korea and the United States? I'm not saying they are. I'm just saying it's a predisposition for nationalists to stereotype, including Korean nationalists, as well as American nationalists and German nationalists and Chinese nationalists and Russian nationalists. Okay, and so then we go back to the groups, and so heads will be group one. And it's heads, so group one, and that is Nick. Where's Nick? Nick, hello, Nick.
Yes, hello.
Okay, tell us where your group fits on this scale.
We actually decided on neutral cannot decide as well, because the question said Korean Peninsula. If it would have only said South Korea, we would have disagreed. But because it says Korean Peninsula, that also includes North Korea. I think the US would definitely comment on that because they want to interfere with North Korea because of their relation with China, and also they really have bad freedom of speech because it's basically a dictatorship with how it is going in North Korea. Therefore, I think they would comment on that because it's the main like threat, right, for the US, because they're basically very big ally of the communistic China, and therefore they would probably make comments based on that. But if it wasn't mentioning Korean Peninsula, I would definitely disagree because they wouldn't really comment on their ally of South Korea.
That is the problem when you criticize other countries' human rights conditions, that those groups that you're trying to promote or protect, they risk becoming perceived as spies of the outside country, criticizing the human rights conditions of those people within that country. And that's maybe one of the great tragedies of the American intervention in Afghanistan, because the Americans were saying for years that they are in Afghanistan to promote the human rights of women and girls, the rights of women to go to school, to study. And of course, if you're the Taliban fighting for self-determination, that makes you very suspect. It's likely to make you very suspect of human rights for women if the Americans were claiming they're bombing and killing Taliban and occupying the country to liberate your women. I mean, you can't get more insulting than that, right? You Taliban are so barbaric, we have to save your own women from you. Doesn't it make you? And it's tragic. It's so tragic. I mean, I'm listening to the American news reports and they're interviewing all these women who have fled Afghanistan, crying. I want to be able to work. I want a job. I want my children to go to school. And now, now the Americans are no longer there, at least not officially. T-Men.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we actually had a well, different point of views. So Alyssa, the two girls, actually thought they disagreed because they thought it wasn't the United States who should comment on it. It should be the UN, the United Nations, because they're more, the UN is more about human rights and so on. Also, we discussed, I was more neutral, cannot decide, just because I didn't know which precise side we had to look, if we had to look at the ethical question around it or the foreign policy question around it. Because if we're looking at the ethical question, then yes, of course, you should everyone should actually comment on every country who is violated any human rights conditions. Then also, if you look at the paper or the text or in the book material that we will see for Friday, it says that human rights conditions are actually very broad. Even if a country is too poor for healthcare, for education, even then there are breaches in the human rights conditions. So then, for example, everyone should also be commenting on China and other and a lot of other countries. Then I would then also, so I would agree on that part. But if we're really looking at the foreign policy part, I would maybe more disagree, because I think if we're looking at the situation that happened back between Trump and Kim Jong-un, that was because men have ego. And if you keep on insulting North Korea, and especially if only one person is in power, I feel that there might be a possibility that they both, well, that someone decides to launch, well, that Kim Jong-un decides to launch a nuclear weapon just because you keep on bashing his ego.
Well, I think that's, again, would be kind of a suicidal move because, of course, it would lead to the vaporization of North Korea. But again, the threat of nuclear war, the threat of accidental war is the reason why countries want nuclear weapons. And that's becoming a more and more important consideration. I was just reading the latest book about the Trump administration by Bob Woodward and Robert Costa called Peril, and highlighted what I read last night about how on the eve of the US election in November 2020, the Chinese military was on high alert. And this involves millions of people, right? And it takes somebody to make a mistake to trigger confusion, hostility, anger, particularly if people die through that mistake, and leads to standard operating procedures involving hundreds of thousands of human beings acting according to pre-programmed plans about what we should do when something happens that could produce a war by accident. And so the US General Milley, who's still in power, called the Chinese general to persuade him that United States, Trump would not be able to order a military attack or strike on Chinese interests as a way by which to mobilize the Americans to support him in the form of in the midst of a new war. So This concern about I didn't, okay, thank you. Okay, I'm not muted now. So in terms of human rights diplomacy, ideally you want a situation, first off, in which we have to recognize that national self-determination is a human right, that aspiring nations, if we really want to work for peace, we want peace, 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 peace. If you want peace through promoting human rights, arguing that violence and conflict and violent conflict happens because of injustice. Injustice. That injustice has to include the denial of self-determination for nations. Because if you oppose national self-determination, you're going to have to kill people. The biggest source of human rights violations is war. You want to promote human rights, work for peace. You want to work for peace, recognize that national self-determination is a human right, including for the Palestinians. If you engage in the messianic advocacy of human rights in a target state by the government of another state, risks generating a counterproductive nationalist reaction in the target state, right? That the Uyghurs become considered to be a fifth column source of support for America, while the Americans complain about the treatment of Uyghurs in China. It might, this reaction might include the enhancement of demagogical appeal of national symbols. You know, of course, the Chinese Communist Party would point to America's statements of concern for the Tibetans, for the Dalai Lama and the Tibetans and the Uyghurs as evidence of the Americans seeking to divide and weaken China, when of course the Americans don't really care all that much about the human rights of Muslims in other parts of the world. So it can lead to the misreading by the target state of the intentions of the government initiating this messianic policy, stereotyping and persecution of the very groups within the target state, which the initiator hoped to support through reactive targeting by governmental and non-governmental nationalistic constituencies could happen. And so I am now going to have to end Zoom because I need to be able to save this class. So bye.